Maria, piena di grazia, il Signore è con te. Sei benedetta fra le donne. Grazia, il Signore è con te. Sei benedetta fra le donne, benedetto è il frutto del tuo seno, Gesù. Ave Maria, piena di grazia, il Signore è con te. Sei benedetta fra le donne, benedetto è il frutto del tuo seno, Gesù. piena di grazia, il Signore è con te. Tu sei benedetta fra le donne e benedetto è il frutto del tuo seno, Gesù.
Laudetur Jesus Christus, praised be Jesus Christ, and welcome to this broadcast of the Conclave to elect a new Pope. We're coming to you live from St. Peter's Square, where hundreds of pilgrims and curious tourists have come to see whether the smoke from the chimney of the Sistine Chapel this morning will be black or white.
Over the next couple of hours or so, we'll be exploring the history, as well as our own memories of previous conclaves, the ongoing Jubilee of Hope, and our memories and the legacy of the late Pope Francis. I'm Christopher Wells.
And I'm Devin Watkins, and we're joined for this live commentary this morning by our colleague in St. Peter's Square, Kelsey Gussie. We'll hopefully be joining with her this couple of times this morning. And three of our guests who have been in Rome for many decades, Paulist Father Greg Uppersell, Joan Lewis, and Dr. Don Prudlow.
And as you know, if you've seen the broadcast last night, of course, after a rather long and perhaps unexpectedly long wait, we did see the black smoke at right about 9 o'clock last night. I think everybody was expecting it a little earlier. I know the crowd in the square was a bit anxious at that point. There were several rounds of applause where I think people were encouraging the Cardinals, who of course can't hear anybody, to proceed with the election. As you probably know, there's one election after the Cardinals go into conclave. That event happened last night, or we showed that on Vatican Radio. And subsequently, we will be having two elections, if necessary, in the morning and two in the afternoon going forward. We are expecting smoke possibly at the first vote this morning. If that happens, it will signify a valid election and will be white. If not, instead of burning the ballots, if the election does not go through, they immediately proceed to a second scrutiny, as we call it. And after the second vote, there will certainly be smoke, either black or white. So we're in for 2 or 3 hours, perhaps, this morning, and we'll continue to bring you coverage and commentary on the papal election.
And we thank you for joining us this Thursday morning of May 8th. Some of you may be following us on our various Vatican media channels, perhaps the Vatican News app or the Radio Vaticana app, the Vatican News web portal, or Vatican News English YouTube channel or Facebook Live feed. We also welcome all of you who are joining us through our partner broadcast stations. And as Chris was mentioning, this broadcast will last until we see the smoke rising from the chimney. And if we see black smoke, that means the Cardinals have not agreed on the next Pope, and so we'll close the signal shortly afterwards.
And of course, white smoke will mean that a pope has been elected. There are 133 cardinal-electors, and a full 2/3 majority is necessary for the election. That means that to be elected, the next pope will have received at least 89 cardinal-electors who have decided on the man that will lead the Catholic Church into the future. At that point, we will continue the broadcast until the Pope has appeared on the balcony. Perhaps some of you remember the last election or previous conclaves. There is a period of time between the white smoke and the appearance on the balcony of the new pope. We'll continue our live broadcast throughout all of that, and then at least until the Urbi et Orbi blessing, the new pope's first blessing of the city of Rome and of the whole world.
And maybe we could get our guests to introduce themselves and tell us a little about your history here in Rome. Father Greg?
I'm Father Greg Appercell. I'm the Vice Rector at St. Patrick's Church, San Patrizio, the Church for Catholic Americans here in Rome. I was the Vice Rector of Santa Susanna beginning in 1996, and then after 6 years took a break, went back to the States, and then came back in 2004 to be the Rector until our church closed in 2013. And eventually we moved into St. Patrick's Church, where I was the Rector for a while, and at the invitation of Pope Francis himself to move to that church, as the Irish Augustinians were going back to Ireland. And in between that time, I was Director of Formation for the Paulus Seminary in Washington, D.C., and then came back here again in 2013 to support our new pastor, Father Matt.
And so how many popes have you seen, Father Greg?
How many popes have I seen? 3.
3, okay.
Hopefully 4.
All right. And Joan, tell us a little about yourself.
Well, Joan Lewis. I've been in the Eternal City for over 4 decades, and part of that time I worked actually at the Vatican in the press office, Vatican Information Service for many years under Pope John Paul. But basically, a lot of my life has been dedicated in some way through the media to covering the Vatican, the Pope, and the Catholic Church. And after, shall we say, I retired from the Vatican, I did have a show here at Vatican Radio for 20 years called Joan Knows. And that was a huge joy. I have a similar radio show today for EWTN. I was the first bureau chief of EWTN in Rome. Came in 2005. We opened that office. And the popes that I have known, the first pope in whose presence I was John the 23rd. The subsequent popes are the ones I've spoke to and got to know, if you will, and cover. And that would be Paul VI and John Paul I, actually. I was here for his election and first Mass. John, he, of course, was Pope for an extraordinarily brief time. When John Paul II was elected, I was in Cairo, Egypt. And then for Benedict, by that time, I was working for the Vatican, and so covered Francis for EWTN. So a lot of history with popes.
Dr. Don, you've also been here a long time, so tell us a little bit about yourself and your background.
Thanks. I am the Warren Professor of Catholic Studies at the University of Tulsa, and I've been coming to Rome for nearly a quarter century. I remember working with Vatican media for the last conclave for the installation of Pope Francis. And I'm also a scholar, a medieval scholar. I work a lot at the Vatican Library. And we've been here so often. My son, who has a birthday in May, which is usually when we come, he's had more than half of his birthdays in Rome and not in the United States. So we're here quite often, and I'm very happy to help out my friends at Vatican Media.
And in fact, Dr. Prudlow, perhaps we can start with you. You are a professor of history. I know you have written a number of books, but you also specialize in medieval history. There's certainly many centuries of history behind the papal conclaves. Perhaps you could give us a brief rundown of historically how have we elected popes?
Well, we know that the first successors of St. Peter were appointed. When the Roman Church was small, each successor would appoint their next successor, and as the Church grew, as it grew massively in the 2nd and 3rd centuries, it became the prerogative of the Roman clergy. The people that knew the city the best, that knew the Church the best, would make that selection. The Roman clergy would meet, they would select a successor, and then he would be acclaimed by the people. He'd be presented to the people, and so this became the normal way of doing things for nearly 500 or 600 years. As the papacy became more powerful, as it became known that the influence that it had throughout the Church and beyond the Church, we started to see interference by secular officials, by kings and princes and emperors. And so there was a long struggle to secure the religious office of the papacy that eventually culminated in the creation of the conclave. And the election was reserved to a special subset of the clergy of Rome that came to be known as cardinals, in Latin, the hinges of the Roman Church. And even today, we retain this practice. We saw last Sunday each one of the cardinals go to their titular churches, the ones where they were the nominal pastors of, and they celebrated Mass. They met the people of that parish. And so their title to be electors of the Pope comes from that connection, comes from that deeply Roman connection. So a bishop from Burma or from Singapore or from South Africa will be a Roman pastor and will participate in those elections. Even after the reservation of the election to cardinals in 1059, there was still the problem of external interference, and sometimes this external influence led to serious deadlocks within the college, especially as the college got quite small in the 13th century. There was a famous conclave, the longest conclave, from 1268 to 1271 in the beautiful town of Viterbo, that really led to much frustration on the part of the broader church, and eventually led the people of Viterbo, the leaders of Viterbo, to putting the cardinals on bread and water, and eventually taking the roof off where they were meeting to introduce them to the elements and encourage, let's say, a more hasty, quicker decision. Following this, the next pope, Blessed Gregory the Tenth, issued the constitution Ubi Periculum, which prescribed the conclave in largely the form that we have it today. And his constitution has been modified slightly, but it retains most of its force. This reservation survived through the papal sojourn in Avignon, and when they returned to Rome, the first election in the Sistine Chapel being in 1492, a significant year. And then being in Rome for most of the rest of the time. The most recent conclave outside the city of Rome was in Venice during the Napoleonic period in the year 1800, 1799 to 1800. And so what we see through the 19th century is a shortening of conclaves. Conclaves used to be very long, sometimes 3 months, 6 months. And then following the reign of Pius IX and the increasing availability of communications, these conclaves were enabled to become shorter and shorter. And so we see the modern average. We're very used to quick conclaves today. I think Cardinals very sensitive to the media, to the way that they present themselves to the world, not wanting to be seen as divided. And so the conclave has averaged between 2 and 5 days over the last 150 years. But we can see that even today, that this exercises a fascination for Catholics and for those beyond the Church. And given the kind of tools that we have for outreach, for social media, for all of the different channels that we can offer these things to people, and people have responded. They see that this conclave, which is deeply, deeply rooted in history, is at the same time something that can draw people and show people the durability and the beauty of the Catholic Church.
Thank you, Devin. Thank you, Don, for a brief overview of a really fascinating history of 2,000 years of determining who is going to lead the Church of Jesus Christ as the successor of St. Peter. Perhaps now might be a good time to talk a little bit about the process as it currently stands. Devin, how do we go through the process of electing a pope?
Yeah, so Joan has seen more of these than most of us, and so maybe she could tell us a little bit about how about kind of the average of how many ballots it takes.
Well, this is a fascinating study, and it covers like from 1903 to today. We have, on average, the Pope is elected on the third day after about 8 ballots. Now, we had 3 popes, Pius XII, John Paul I, and Benedict, who were elected on the second day. And the shortest number of ballots ever was Pius XII. That was 3 ballots. But the longest day was 5 days, as you mentioned. So Francis, of course, was 2 days and 5 ballots. So not really terribly lengthy. We don't have any Viterbo times in there, thank the Lord.
And what about could you tell us a little bit about the process of the election, how they cast ballots?
Once the cardinals have entered into the Sistine Chapel and are locked therein, and only exit to go back, the cardinals residing, of course, now at the two Santa Marta residences, they are there and pretty much start balloting, voting right away when they get into there's a document, an amazing document, 1996, by Pope John Paul, called Universi Dominici Egregius. And it outlines absolutely, nothing is overlooked, from the death of a pope to the new pope coming out on the balcony with his name and wearing white. And when they voted yesterday, one vote, and today two in the morning, and then if we have to proceed on, as you said, what they have is a rectangular sheet of paper. At the top is written in Latin, "I elect as the Supreme Pontiff," and each cardinal then fills out below that the name of the person he wants to see. And what I love is that John Paul it is mentioned that he should write it so it's legible, but the writing should not be recognized as belonging to any particular person, because any one of those cardinals would have signed documents, their signatures would be available.
And that's also why they burn the ballots, too, so that there's no record and like it was this
exactly.
cardinal voting for this one and this one got...
And any notes, if some cardinal is sitting there making notes during a vote, a note for himself or whatever, all of those notes have to be destroyed along with the ballots. And so then each ballot is folded twice. It is brought up and put into a container that has a slot in the top, and then you have the three cardinals who are the scrutineers, and they count the ballots. The names are mentioned. They're mentioned a second time. They're checked three ways. And by the way, if there is a vote, and it seems that will be the case this time, if there is a cardinal who is too ill to get to the Sistine Chapel, the three scrutineers go to him. And they take the vote in the same way. He has the same piece of paper. He has written the name down. That goes in that little slot. Then they go back to the Sistine Chapel, and of course that vote is valid and is counted. And when you get to, as was mentioned just minutes ago, when in this particular conclave they get to the number 89, the percentage, the 2/3 needed, that is the time when obviously that name is announced, that person is welcomed, and there is some time that passes between the white smoke is there.
Yeah.
Okay, wow, habemus papam. And then the person, it might be 20 minutes, it's just congratulations. All of his brother cardinals coming up, and then you put the vestments on. You go to the room of tears and put the white papal vestments on.
And in fact, when they do the balloting, all of this process is deliberately designed, as Joan mentioned. Every aspect of this is laid out in very precise detail, and it's precisely to ensure that there's no question about the validity and the conclusiveness of the election. Also, as Joan mentioned, when they do burn the ballots, they also burn all of the notes. However, a record is kept of the vote, which will go into a secret archive, which is only accessible to the popes, or if they choose to release that information. But we do keep a record so that when we do get the 89 votes, they will continue so that every vote is counted. That final vote is annotated and sealed. There's a whole process for that as well, where they bring in proto-notaries and other officials to certify and ensure the validity of the election. That's sealed up. And again, as Joan says, the new pope will go into the room of tears after he has accepted, after he has chosen a name, and we'll have some time in prayer. We'll be given the white vestment. And I think a lot of people know the story that they have three papal cassocks prepared, three white cassocks, small, medium, and large, so that whoever is elected will have something that at least roughly fits him. They actually bring in a tailor who can adjust it a little bit to make sure it works. And there's a wonderful story about John the 23rd, which I told last night. John the 23rd, you'll remember, Joan, was a stout, famously Italian peasant. And when he was elected, the cassock, the large cassock, was not big enough for him. The tailor actually had to open it up in the back, and it was closed around him almost like a hospital gown, of course, with his regular clothing, cardinal-electors garments underneath. And that's how he appeared, although, of course, nobody could see that on the balcony.
Actually, if you go to our social media, our Instagram, you will see the images. We've got a couple of photos, and we've got a video of these 3 papal vestments that are white, sitting in the Room of Tears. You can actually see the Room of Tears if you go to our Instagram account at Vatican News. And we have our correspondent in the square, Kelsey Gussie. You can see on your screen if you're following on television. If you're not on radio, I'll tell you about it. We see the seagulls who have famously appeared. They're like locusts
we're with
in
Vatican News, so I don't know if we're...
So what we're going to do is we're going to go to Kelsey Gussie, our correspondent in the square. So Kelsey, how are you?
I'm good. Thanks so much for having me, guys.
So what could you give us a feel for what's going on in the square this morning?
Honestly, it's pretty packed. You can feel the excitement from a lot of people. There's tour groups that keep filing into the square, and you see them taking pictures of the Sistine Chapel, just waiting for that smoke to come out, which probably won't be for a couple of hours, but everyone's very excited just to see where the smoke will come out of.
And have you talked to any of the pilgrims yet this morning?
I have, yes, and actually it's funny because a lot of people are here, right, from all around the world, even some that have come to study and then just happen to be here during this period. And I actually spoke to one priest, and he was saying how the Pope, the election of the Pope, is not just special for Catholics. He was saying how for Christians, non-Catholics, everyone, this is just a historic moment because when the Pope speaks, people listen. And so he said it was a good example of the universality of not just the Church, but then the importance of this election and how it'll impact the rest of the world.
Thank you, Kelsey. Is there anything else that you'd want to tell us about the square and the preparations there? There's security to get in, I imagine? Yes, there's actually quite a lot of policemen, the Italian carabinieri, and everyone. Like, there's a lot of security to get into the square, and you can just tell it's filling up very quickly, so I imagine over the next couple of hours it'll get even more packed. And I was in the square last night doing our live connections with the studio, and there were... one thing you have to say about the Italian civil authorities, whenever there is a major event in the Vatican, everything works like clockwork. You can't say anything bad about them because they are very professional, and the security was guaranteed. You remember the funeral mass. There were, over 200,000 or 400,000 in the area, and there were no incidents. There were over 80 heads of state and government. And there was serious concentration on the part of this Italian civil authorities to guarantee the security for everyone. And now we could... so thank you, Kelsey. We'll be coming back to you again soon. Last night when I was in the square, I spoke to several people, but one of them was a layman, a guy from Scotland who had come in just precisely for the conclave. And he remembers when he was... he doesn't remember, but when he was John Paul II went to Scotland, his father lifted him onto the shoulders of John Paul II. And so here's a little clip of my interview with him last night.
My name's Patrick Grady, and I'm here from Glasgow in Scotland.
What brings you here to Rome?
Well, one of my earliest memories is as a young boy being put on my dad's shoulders to see John Paul II when he visited Edinburgh in 1982. And my dad passed away earlier this year, so I kind of thought it would be quite a nice thing to come when this opportunity presents itself to see the new Pope, the next generation. So it's a bit of a whim, it's a bit of a risk, but I think like everybody else in the square, I'm quite excited to see what happens over the next couple of days.
So what are your hopes for the future of the Church as we move into a new era?
Well, I think the world will benefit from a Pope who can be a steady and guiding hand, who can continue to speak out in the same way that Pope Francis did on the big issues facing the world today, of climate change, of migration, of the need for justice and peace, but who also perhaps brings some of the experience, if you like, and the different perspectives that his two predecessors also brought, John Paul and Benedict. I think someone that can combine all the best things of the three popes of my life so far, I think is really what the Church and the world would like right now.
And so that was a young man named Patrick Grady from Scotland coming just for the conclave. I was at dinner yesterday evening, and I ran into another man who had come in from Munich, Germany, and he came in specifically for the conclave. He said as soon as he heard the news about the death of Pope Francis, he did his calculations, and he knew that the conclave would be this week. And so he came, he booked his tickets, he got a place on the Borgo, and was here. And so there are a lot of people who have come just for this historic event. I mean, it doesn't happen very often. We hope it happens as little as possible. And so maybe we could go back to a little bit to the proceedings. We were speaking about the Room of Tears, and Joan was mentioning the 3 boxes.
Oh, yes, what I found astonishing, because we in the media all got the pictures, the 9 or so of the Room of Tears. And I noticed on a table some small square boxes. I don't know what would be in those, but there were 3 boxes the exact same size a shoes come in. So how do you, I can understand vestments, but how do you pick the size of shoes? You know, so that'll be interesting, because they don't want the prelate to go out with whatever he's wearing. They want the, I'm guessing, papal red shoes. So we shall see.
Well, it was papal red shoes, and then Pope Francis changed that. He came out with his black shoes. One thing about it, we probably won't know his shoe attire, because there's the tapestry. At least the first night, there's the tapestry on the balcony, and so you probably can't see his shoes.
Sure.
But Father Greg, maybe you could tell us about a change that Pope Francis brought in.
I had heard that there was a particular store in Rome named Gamarelli's who has traditionally made the white robes for the Pope. And Pope Francis has said, what happens to the ones that were rejected? Why can't we keep those and reuse them, or not reuse them, but use them for the first time to save money and to also and make use of beautiful vestments that were made.
And in fact, while we're still on the topic of proceedings and different possibilities, I think one of the very interesting possibilities that we might see, although very, very unlikely, I think everybody would agree, is the possibility of someone being chosen who's not actually in the room. It's, as many people know, the only requirement for a pope is that it be a man who can be made a bishop. Historically, we've even seen bishops, not popes, but we've seen bishops who were not even Christian when they were elected bishop, and they had to go through baptism and ordination to all the minor orders, to the diaconate, to the priesthood, and then to the episcopacy. Universi Dominici Gregis, the document that controls conclaves, talks about the possibility of someone who's not a bishop being elected. I believe there's one cardinal in the conclave who is not a bishop. He's able to do that with a dispensation from Pope Francis. And if he were to be elected the Pope, the first thing you have to do after he accepts, the very first thing, it's very explicit, is you have to ordain him to the episcopate. But the interesting part of that is if someone is elected who is not a cardinal-elector, and in that case we might see an older cardinal. Paul VI restricted the voting cardinals to cardinals under the age of 80, but there are certainly some cardinals with very strong personalities, pastoral records, who might be considered. They might be elected. There's also a possibility, we've seen this in the past, where a bishop or an archbishop, or even very famously a monk, Celestine V, who was elected. And in that case, there's a procedure for the cardinals suspending the votes, because they have to be in contact with the man that is chosen to see if he'll accept. And in that case, we wouldn't have any smoke at all, and there would be a lot of speculation amongst the commentators and the analysts and the journalists as to what's going on in the conclave. And there's a lot of interesting possibilities for how do you contact someone who's chosen? How do you get him to Rome if he's not in the city? Even if he's here, how do you get him into the conclave? And we mentioned Pope Celestine V, whose name has come up more recently because he was one of the few popes to resign. And maybe, Joan, would you like to talk about very recently we saw the resignation of Pope Benedict, which is a little change in the a very significant change in the history of the papacy.
Well, indeed, it was a shock because no one living on the planet at that time had known. I mean, it was centuries, before from Celestine to Benedict. And the interesting thing was Benedict had been to the tomb of Celestine at one point, which people brought up when Pope Francis made a visit to the tomb of Saint Celestine. When he was not doing well health-wise, does he have resignation on his mind? Is that some kind of sign? And of course, as we know from his ill health and how he died, it was resignation we knew was never on his mind. But it was a shock when Pope Benedict said it. And I think that, I remember when John Paul died, I was asked on television what was his greatest legacy, and I said his entire life, but he taught us how to die with dignity. And I felt that Benedict, with his resignation, because of his humility, his feeling he could not pursue the papacy as should be, the walking, the travels, and everything else, in his humility, he decided that he didn't care what anybody else said, he had to resign. And I just think it was a beautiful lesson on how to live. So with John Paul, how to die in dignity, and Benedict, how to live in dignity.
And the interesting thing about Benedict's resignation is that on a theological level, it could be said, and he was an eminent theologian, he knew what he was doing. He knew that he was stepping back and resigning and following in something that hadn't happened in 700 years. But following the theology of what his action was, it wasn't just that he was weak and that he couldn't do it anymore, that somebody was overpowering him, or whatever the speculation may have been at the time and still continues, is that he was making a point. He was saying the papacy is the power of the papacy is personal, but it's an office. It's not an elected. He is an elected monarch. He's one of the few absolute monarchs left in the world. But his office is just that. And so if he divests himself, as Benedict the 16th did, he's saying, I freely let this go. And so theologically, it puts the papacy in a little bit of perspective from that.
And interestingly, Celestine V was not the first pope to resign, probably. The early history of the popes is not always clear. Anyone who's studied a little bit of history knows that what we know about the past is very conditioned by the sources that we have, and even by the act of telling history over many, many centuries. He wasn't the first to resign, but the earlier popes, if they resigned, had resigned under pressure, if they were taken away into exile, if they were under threat of martyrdom. Again, there's a lot of confusion about what actually happened in those circumstances. So when Celestine became pope, he was pope for a short time, and I think it's fair to say he realized that he was not up to the burdens of the office in a time of great confusion for the papacy, with lots of influences going around. He actually had to commission a theological study and asked theologians of his day, is it possible for the Pope to resign? Because it was always perceived as a lifetime appointment. A bishop is considered symbolically, at least, to be married to his diocese, and certainly with the more important sees, like the Diocese of Rome, the bishop is given the bishop's ring, which signifies his espousal to the diocese. So there is a real question. Just as you cannot divorce your partner while they're still alive, can a pope symbolically divorce his church? And of course, they decided that clearly. Celestine was told, yes, it is possible for the pope to renounce or resign the papacy, and did so. And then, Devin, as you were talking about, Cardinal Ratzinger, later Pope Benedict XVI, a very eminent theologian, did invest his act of resignation in complete freedom in a time when the church was, for all of the controversies of our day, the church is at peace, but did invest it with real theological import.
And we're sticking with the history, and so maybe we could go. We have a program put together by our colleague Lisa Zengarini, who will take us through a little bit from the The conclave and the form that we know, the one that started yesterday, is the 76th under this form, and this goes back to the Middle Ages, as we've said. And so this is also the 26th that's held in the Sistine Chapel, so under the gaze of Michelangelo's Last Judgment. So let's listen to this program from Lisa Zengarini, who tells us a little bit about the modern history of the conclave.
The term conclave comes from two Latin words, cum, with, and clavis, key. In church terminology, it designates both the enclosed place where the papal election is held and the body of cardinals convened there to elect the new pope. This setting was formalized in 1274 by Pope Gregory X after the 3-year-long voting process that led to his election in Viterbo, known to be the longest in history. That landmark reform followed other important changes introduced in the 11th century that began to shape the election of the Pope in the form we know today. Nicholas II first limited voting rights to cardinals in 1059, while Pope Alexander III established the 2/3 majority rule in 1179. Before then, papal elections occurred without a formal structure. For the first 10 centuries of church history, the successor of Peter was chosen with the involvement of the local ecclesial community. Clergy assessed candidates proposed by the faithful, and the bishops chose the pope. Interferences from the political powers of the time also played a major role in the election, often hindering the electoral procedures, as happened in the deadlocked election in Viterbo. In 1621, Gregory XV introduced a requirement for secret and written ballots. In 1904, Pius X abolished any claimed right of exclusion and enforced secrecy about all that happens in the conclave. Later, Pope Paul VI decreed that only cardinals under 80 years old could vote. Although every conclave has been held at the Sistine Chapel since 1878, over the centuries papal elections had taken place in various locations in Italy and even abroad before a fixed setting was decided upon. In his apostolic constitution, Universi Dominici Gregis, Pope John Paul II confirmed the most famous chapel in the world as the official location for the election of the new pope. The duration of conclaves varies. The longest recorded in history was that of Gregory X in 2071. On the opposite end of the conclave durations is the one in 1503, which lasted only a few hours, leading to the election of Pope Julius II. I am Lisa Zengarini.
And as we all know, that this year is the Jubilee of 2025, and what we're witnessing is a sede vacante, an interregnum period, a vacancy, and a conclave in expectation of a new pope. But this isn't the first time such an historic occurrence of events has unfolded. The Jubilee year of 1700 also saw the death of the Pope, the Innocent XII, in September of that year. The conclave was held, and Pope Clement XI was elected the successor of St. Peter. And Father Paul Samasumo runs us through in this program some of the highlights of that similar historical moment that took place 325 years ago.
The sede vacante during the 2025 Holy Year evokes the historical parallels with the year 1700. The Jubilee year was also marked by the death of a Pope, Innocent XII, who died before the end of the Holy Year he had proclaimed, leaving the Church without her pastor. Pope Innocent XII suffered frail health in later years due to podagrass, a form of rheumatic illness that prevented him from personally opening the Holy Door at Christmas in 1699. He died 9 months later on September 27, 1700, at the age of 85. His death ushered in a nearly 2 months period of sede vacante before the election of his successor, Pope Clement XI, on November 23. During that interregnum period, the Vatican's numismatic office minted a coin to commemorate the nearly 2 months of vacancy in the chair of Peter. That coin from 1700 is now on display in the medal collection of the Vatican's Apostolic Library. On its reverse, the coin depicts the dove as the Holy Spirit with the Latin verse from the Gospel of John, Non vos relinquam orphans, meaning, I will not leave you orphans. Professor Eleonora Gianpiccolo, director of the Numismatics Department of the Vatican Library, said the saying refers to the death of Innocent XII, but also conveys a clear message of hope for the conclave that was about to begin. Born Antonio Pignatelli, Pope Innocent XII was known as the father of the poor, and his pastoral approach bore a strong resemblance to that of Pope Francis. He is remembered for his care for the poor and the marginalized. The pontificate initiated projects to help the orphans and the homeless. For example, he founded an institution in the Lateran Palace to house young Roman orphans and to teach them trades. Yet the similarities between the two popes don't end here. Upon his death, Innocent XII donated all his possessions to the poor. The decision finds echoes 3.5 centuries later with Pope Francis's decision to give his belongings to support prison rehabilitation. After the year 1700, the dove of the Holy Spirit became a typical symbol of the sede vacante, since it expresses divine guidance in the selection of the new pope. Unlike the Jubilee begun by Pope Francis this past Christmas Eve, the ritual opening of the 1700 Holy Year, traditionally performed with the 3 hammer strikes, was not presided by Innocent XII due to his severe illness. Due to his advanced illness, the cardinals were forced to choose a substitute to open the holy door in his stead. The Camerlengo, the vice-chancellor, and the dean of the College of Cardinals met and decided to allow the vice-dean, Cardinal de Bouillon, to open the door. When the annual medal of 1700 was issued, the engraver chose not to depict the cardinal who had broken open the wall replacing the pope, but instead portrayed the holy door already open and being crossed by a procession of the faithful. Pope Innocent XII's love for his children, for the Church, is also commemorated by a final, larger medal crafted by Beatrice Amerani, a female member of one of the most important families of engravers at the Papal Mint. On the reverse, a pelican is shown tearing open its chest to feed its young with its blood, an image of Christ's sacrifice and his love for humanity, especially in times when his church on earth lacks her pastor.
And while we're on the subject of the Jubilee year, Father Greg, could you tell us a little bit about the pilgrims? There millions of people are expected to come to Rome, and some already have. So tell us about the
Yes, and some of the pilgrim groups have come to our church, St. Patrick's, from the United States. For instance, Archbishop Perez of the Archdiocese of Philadelphia came with 98 pilgrims and celebrated a couple masses in our church, which was wonderful to have them. And then, of course, the special jubilees are still going on, like the Jubilee of Bands and Entertainers is coming up on the 10th and 11th, and the Eastern churches after that, and the confraternities, and then families. And so those are continuing, although the way it's going to be done until there is a pope is going to be, it'll be different. But we are seeing more and more pilgrims in May and June and July even. And there's the whole week of youth, the Jubilee of Youth at the end of July and the beginning of August, which will attract a lot of people.
Yeah, we know the canonization of Blessed Carlo Acutis was supposed to happen a couple of weeks ago.
27th of April.
27th, yeah.
Yeah,
White Sunday.
and exactly, and
Day
now
before.
that it's just been suspended. So there's speculation it could happen later. It will happen, but they've said it will. They will wait for the new pope to decide when and to confirm it. And so we're looking forward to this renewed Jubilee in a way where everyone will be curious to come and see the new Pope and to be here for the Jubilee year and go through the holy doors.
And that's one of the things too is they want information on how to go through the holy door, what to do before, after, during, and now we just took a group to Santa Maria Maggiore, and so that the added thing of going and pay honor to Pope Francis at his tomb, which is a beautiful experience for many people.
Well, for me, it's been interesting to talk to these pilgrims because they're very happy that there is a church for English speaking and for Catholic Americans in Rome. So they enjoy meeting those of us who are been members of the parish for years, and then meeting fellow pilgrims. So it's a wonderful gathering point.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. What about some of the liturgical events that are planned here in the next few days?
Well, what would always be on a papal schedule, as it is every bishop in the world, you're going to have the Ascension, of course, has to be celebrated. That is on Thursday, May 29th. Pentecost is on June 6th. And then you've got Corpus Christi on June 22nd. And that's always a very special event in Rome. So the new pope will be looking at a liturgical schedule and a Jubilee schedule, lots of events as Father Greg outlined. Many months of events, but the liturgical would be right now, May and June, for sure.
And one of the things that all of the cardinals, as Dr. Don Prodlos mentioned earlier, is every cardinal has a titular church, and St. Patrick's, Father Greg, is the titular church of one of the cardinals in the conclave right now.
Cardinal Thomas Collins, he's the Metropolitan Archbishop Emeritus of Toronto, Canada, and he came to our church on Sunday, celebrated the 10:30 Mass, and gave a wonderful homily, which Joan can tell you about, and was very well received by the people. And we had a baptism of a child at that Mass, too, which was nice.
No, that was truly, truly wonderful. But the great thing, Cardinal Collins has a wonderful personality. He laced his terrific homily with a good dosage of humor. But what he did was so beautiful. He had 3 readings, as we do every Sunday, 2 readings at Mass, and you have the Gospel. He took each of those readings, expounded on it briefly, and then named a quality associated with that reading, first reading, courage, and said this is a quality that a pope must have. The second reading, the quality was vision. A pope must have vision. And then the Gospel, which is the Gospel, of course, of Simon Peter being asked by the Lord, "Do you love me?" And Simon Peter reaffirming strongly 3 times, "You know, Lord, I love you." And Jesus says, "Go feed my sheep." And so the point being in the Gospel, a pope must have great closeness every moment of his day to Christ. So that was just beautiful. And I think to emphasize really what Greg said, the cardinal made it very clear the cardinals are electing the successor, the vicar of Christ. Yeah.
And so Cardinal Collins was mentioning that he's the successor of Peter, right?
Right. He's not the successor of Pope Francis. He's the successor of St. Peter.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And one of the things Cardinal Collins said during his homily was that this baptism that was taking place at the Mass was, he said, there are 2 important events that are taking place in the coming days. One is this baptism that's about to happen, and then the other is the election of the Pope. He said this election, in a way, the election, this new member's entry into the family of God, into the Christian family, that's an act of God, he said. And he said this conclave that's happening, this election of the Pope, that's an act of men. We are electing the Pope under the guidance of the Holy Spirit, but it's an election. It's we choose, and then God kind of confirms this choice and gives His grace of the Holy Spirit to the man who will lead the church.
And as we pass the 11 o'clock hour, I would like to greet once again all those of you who may be joining us. Thanks also to our partners throughout the world, our partner stations. And a reminder that you can follow the Conclave on our Radio Vatican app, the Vatican News web portal, or our YouTube or Facebook live links. We are at a point now in the morning where if a pope, where very likely the cardinals have proceeded to the first morning ballot. If a pope is elected, we would see white smoke, but if a pope is not elected, then we would go immediately to the second vote and wait until after that to get the smoke. Maybe, Joan, you've been a Pope journalist, Vaticanista, for many years, and you've watched more than one conclave. Can you talk a little bit about what happens as the crowds are waiting to look at the smoke and why we have that disjunction between possible smoke and possible not?
Oh, sure. Well, when people, they have an idea. I mean, they know the Cardinals are meeting, it's Thursday morning, the Cardinals are meeting for so many hours. Something is going to come out of that. And so the expectation, just people chit-chatting, but there's an excitement that you feel just walking in the square, just listening to people. But I have to say, the moment the white smoke comes out, the excitement goes into hysteria because you have a person coming out, you don't know who it is, then you find out who it is, then you hear his name, and it's an awesome feeling. The void has been filled. We are no longer sede vacante, without a pope. So many things that can't be done because we were without a pope. So those of us in the church who know this particular aspect of it. But just the faithful, they want to know who their new Holy Father is. And it's an excitement beyond telling. I remember certainly for Pope Benedict, I was working for the Vatican at the time, and we had a very, very strong feeling that he would be elected early, that it would be Cardinal Joseph Ratzinger elected early. And there was great joy as those of us in the press office filed out and went into the square and rejoiced when we heard his name. And then covering the conclave of 2013, I was in the square, but I had to be on television at 8 o'clock, so I'm going back up, and I think it was sometime after 8 that this Jorge Bergoglio comes out onto the balcony, and there was a huge excitement in the crowd. We have a pope, even if we haven't quite heard his name yet. There's this man in white. And then with all the correspondents that were around us on the roof of the Augustinianum, it was like, what's his name? Jorge Bergoglio. What name did he take? Where's he from? So all the questions, and a lot of research had to be done, because when you have someone unexpected, as John Paul II was.
Yeah, he was totally unexpected.
Yes.
He wasn't one among the popable or papabile, as they say.
Exactly.
He was overlooked. The church took a new direction.
But it's a real exciting feeling.
Yeah, Father Greg, have you seen any? Were you around for any of the recent elections, or?
I was here for the election of Pope Francis. Yes, and it was very exciting just being in. I was watching it on TV, but then I went down and was around the area. And it was very exciting because it was something new and unknown, and what does it mean, and where are we going, and the whole difference between the fact that Pope Benedict had resigned, but he was still there, and then this new Pope, and how that would work, throughout the years that followed until the death of Benedict.
Well, the mere fact that he took the name Francis.
Yeah.
And journalists had to discover very quickly that you could not call him Francis the First, because a pope doesn't become the first until there is a second. And so
I remember I was watching rewatching that event. I was there in the square, but I was rewatching it the other day, and the subtitle underneath on one of the broadcasters was Francis the First. And then later in the broadcast, somebody did a little bit of deeper research, and then they took out the first part. And
curiously enough, the first in centuries was John Paul I, and when he was announced as John Paul I.
Yeah.
precisely because it hadn't happened in so long, there was a little question of what was most appropriate. And no one really got to delve too deeply into that in the, I believe it was 33 or 34 days of the John Paul I papacy. But when Francis was elected and chosen, and became the first pope in centuries, except for John Paul I, to choose an entirely new name, they did do a little bit more study and decision making, and Francis made the decision, yes, I am Francis, ego sum Francis, and that, of course, is how he signed his documents, Francis.
And what's on his tomb.
It's interesting to think about what names have never been used. Augustine, Thomas Aquinas, not Thomas the
And there's no
Elder.
Peter the Second or Third.
No, and there's
Only
not
Peter.
And in fact, that was one of the reasons for the custom of changing your name when you became pope to a different name, was the idea that it would not be appropriate to have a Peter II. So the first popes kept their own names. One of the various early ones to change had been named Mercurius, and he felt that the pope should not have the name of a pagan god. So he changed his name, and they continued to take their names for a long time. But then a Peter was elected, and it really did become the idea that we're not going to have a Peter II. And then successively, during a period of reform, a lot of the popes chose names that harkened back to the earliest years of the papacy, the fathers of the church and the early popes, and decided there was a whole string of seconds, Pius II and others, who changed their names, and that became the custom. And now, of course, most popes have most papal names have a long history and long pedigree.
Exactly. And we're at this point, we're going to take a little bit of a break, and it doesn't seem that there has been white smoke, so anything could happen. We're going to stay ready.
We'll keep our eye on the chimney.
And we're going to take a little bit of break for a little bit of music, and we'll be back in a few minutes.
And once again, if you're just joining us, we are broadcasting live from the Vatican. My name is Christopher Wells. We'll be joined here in a few minutes with my co-host, Devin Watkins, our guests, Joan and Father Gregory, and Dr. Joan Lewis, my friend, Dr. Donald Prudlow. As many of you know, many of you have heard Joan Lewis speaking on EWTN. I would like to greet all of our listeners listening in on our partner stations, including EWTN, but also Catholic Faith Network in America, UCTV, Uganda Catholic Television, Mata TV India, Shalom World Television Networks USA, at Madarshan TV, Radio Katipunan from the Philippines, Catholic TV, and Luminous Radio. And perhaps we could talk about, we saw we're looking at the most famous chimney in the world. And Joan, you were just telling me now about your experience of watching very famous papal chimneys in the conclaves that you've experienced. You've experienced 5, 6. Were you here for the election of Paul VI?
I've been here for the death of 5 popes and 4 or 5 conclaves, but not all covering all of them
and a papal resignation.
And a papal resignation, exactly. And then I think I said earlier the most unusual when it was John Paul I who died. I was at his inaugural mass, and then left several days later on a special assignment for 3 months in Cairo, Egypt, with the New York Times. And that's where I learned about the death of John Paul I and the election of John Paul II. And exciting times to come back here then to a new pope, leave Rome, be away for a couple months, and have the third pope, of course, of 1978, John Paul II.
And Joan Lewis, our special guest. We also have Paulist Father Greg Appercell. Welcome back.
I was just thinking of the fall of 1978 and the year of the 3 popes. That was when I entered the Paulist novitiate. So it's sort of like the beginning of my religious life. Not sort of. It was the beginning of my religious life, and it was such a huge event, a huge series of events in our Catholic Church.
Yeah, and so just to get some of this excitement, we're going to go to a couple of correspondents in the square. First, we're going to go back to Kelsey Gussie, who's still in the square. And Kelsey, how are things going there?
Good. I've actually been talking to a lot more pilgrims who have come from all over, and there's actually one couple who are here on their honeymoon. And they were originally supposed to have a mass, like an audience, with the Pope yesterday, but obviously things changed, and they're super happy to be here to see the potential white smoke. And other people have come also on vacation, one celebrating her daughter's 18th birthday, and so this is an extra special gift that she'll definitely remember forever.
And you've seen the seagulls? Everybody's been noticing the seagulls. I think they're getting their own page on X, and right now most of our images are just of the smoke, the chimney. It doesn't seem to have any particular fauna around, but has anyone been discussing the natural phenomena that occur around there?
About the seagull?
Yes.
Well, the seagulls have been a topic of discussion for sure. It's definitely like a signal to people to see whether the white smoke will be happening or not. And I think a lot of people have joked that the seagulls know more than we do, but we'll just have to wait and see.
Oh, thank you, Kelsey.
And in fact, Kelsey, I was very happy to hear your story about the newlyweds here in Rome. It reminds me of a story from the election of Benedict XVI. And I had 2 friends here in Rome, a fellow from New York and his wife from Germany. And when they were married here. They met here in Rome and were married here in Rome. And what many people perhaps don't know is it's possible to get married in St. Peter's Basilica. So my friends asked to be married in St. Peter's Basilica. They were given one of the side chapels. You don't get married at the high altar,
Chapel
obviously.
Of the choir.
The chapel of the choir. Yes, exactly. And so they had a very beautiful ceremony. And they actually asked a bishop that they knew to celebrate the wedding for them. And that bishop, the bride's friend, was Cardinal Joseph Ratzinger. Mm-hmm. And very shortly after that, he became Pope. So they were in the square doing stand-up interviews with journalists, and they had a picture of themselves in their wedding outfits with the new Pope who had celebrated their wedding. So there's so many of these stories. Father, I'm sure you can tell.
I used to do,
countless tales.
in my early days, I did celebrate 25 weddings a year in the chapel of the choir. And I remember when Pope John Paul II died in 2005, we had 4 weddings scheduled during the time that he was laid out for viewing.
Laying in state.
And so they, at the time, I don't know they would do it today, they said, you can have those weddings still. You can go in the back door. We'll close the curtain and no music. Or they can come back to our Church of Santa Susana. All 4 couples decided to do it that way.
Wow.
And it was, there's a huge long line of people streaming up to pay homage to Pope John Paul II, and we were doing these little weddings in the chapel of choir.
In fact, that speaks to the pastoral role of St. Peter's Basilica, where they have not only weddings, they also have baptisms. Have you done baptisms in the Basilica?
No, because they do them on Sundays, and it was hard for me to get away from the parish. I did 2.
But with your church and with St. Patrick's, Rome is certainly a tourist destination, but for Catholics, it's a spiritual destination as well. So you still have to do pastoral care.
Yes, yeah, and I also do what I call spiritual walking tours, where we go to see 3 or 4 or 5 churches on a Tuesday morning, and pilgrims come as well as parishioners.
And of course, that ties in with both the Jubilee this year.
Yes.
We've already talked about you welcoming many pilgrims, but also with the idea of synodality, which has been the perhaps premier initiative of Pope Francis in these past years. Can you talk about the idea of walking together in that context for you in Rome?
And in fact, I remember one time we did have a tour of this several years ago in Santa Maria Maggiore, and they told us to wait in the vestibule because there was a special guest coming through. They turned all the lights on, and we turned, and Pope Francis walked right out of the sacristy to go to the icon to pray before a trip that he was taking to Mexico. And so people said, who are you going to have next week on your tour? Surprise guest.
Wonderful.
But they loved it. It was a great experience.
And we're going to go back to the square right now. We've got our other colleague, Eduardo Giribaldi, who's there in the square. Eduardo?
Hi, Devin. Hi, everybody.
And how are things seeming on your end?
Oh, wow, the atmosphere is really electric here, and it's surprising because it's filled with young people. I've actually interviewed a few of them, and the most striking thing is that many of them came here on purpose just to see the smoke, and that's really surprising because they told me that they had to organize and pack their stuff and come here in just a few days. But they are here. They've been here since 7 a.m. in the morning because they still didn't know about the smoke times, but they are still here, and the weather is pretty warm right now, so it's even a nice view of the square filled with people. They are making connections, so it's really a nice atmosphere. It's really good to be here now, and we're waiting, of course, for the new Pope.
Exactly. Yesterday, when I was in the square, there was some young people who started a conga line, and they were dancing through, and it was getting a little bit raucous in the square as everyone waited for the smoke to come out in the evening. It's easy to forget that this is a working day in Rome, and so I imagine there are more young people than older people.
Definitely. I mean, even old people inside, but young people make the most out of the year. And that's really encouraging, I would say as well, because, of course, many of them are asking for a brave Pope, a courageous Pope, and they really hope in the spirit of the Jubilee that the next Pope, they don't care so much about the nationality, about the ideology, but what they're asking, I mean, what I'm perceiving is that they're asking for a brave Pope, so a Pope that can face the difficulties and the troubles that the world is undergoing right now.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Eduardo.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
And speaking about weddings, and Kelsey was telling us about the honeymooners who are in the square, and she interviewed them, and we're going to hear from them, her conversation with them. It's Sarah and Cameron, who are on their honeymoon here for the Conclave, probably incidentally, from Indiana in the U.S.
We came here for our honeymoon. We got married 5 days ago, and we were supposed to have Mass with the Pope yesterday. So instead, we got to be a part of the conclave and watch it happen.
Congratulations, first of all. That's exciting. But how cool is it that now your honeymoon has turned into potentially seeing the election of a new Pope? How would that be to be here for a new Pope?
Oh, it's been amazing. Last night, we were standing in the square just watching, waiting for the smoke to come. The anticipation's been incredible. Honestly, a dream. I was looking forward to Mass with the Pope, but this is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity.
For sure.
For sure. And all of our family, now that they know we're here, they're like, all right, give us the play-by-play. What's going on here? So it'd be really cool if we get to see the white smoke today.
How would you describe the atmosphere here today, yesterday?
Excitement. Everyone's very joyful, looking forward to what will happen next. No one knows who it's going to be, so whatever it is, it's going to be a mystery, and everyone's excited for it.
Yeah, I would say the same.
Okay. And just lastly, do you guys have any hopes or what you expect from the new Pope for the future of the Church?
I mean, there's a lot going on in the world right now, and just really to be a leader in the Church. Whatever it may be, take a stance and move the Church forward with whatever that may be.
And that was Sarah and Cameron, who were coming in from the U.S. state of Indiana on their honeymoon. Kelsey also spoke to another priest, a student priest here in Rome from the Archdiocese of Bombay in India. His name is Father Prashant Padu. Let's hear from him.
Did you come specifically for the conclave?
Not really. I'm doing my studies over here in Rome, so since it's time of the conclave, I thought it's the best time to be here in the square, so probably get to witness the white smoke and also the new Pope.
And why do you think so many people from around the world, whether they're Catholic or not, come to the square during this time of the conclave?
I think the Pope is like a very important figure. The Pope has some standing, whatever the Pope says, the world listens. It's not only the Catholics, but people all around the world, they listen to what the Pope says and they respect the Pope's views. And therefore, you see that there's a lot of respect for the authority of the Pope, and that's why people come here. And I think the Church has had a wonderful tradition of having very good popes who have led the Church and even given guidance to the world, in their pontificate. And therefore, to witness this historic event will be a blessing for all of them also, and that's why they come over here.
And that was Father Prashant Padu, a student priest here in Rome from the Archdiocese of Bombay. And now we've been talking about about the conclave. We've been discussing the intricacies of it and what goes on behind the scenes, what goes on ahead of it. And now let's get into what everybody is downloading and watching, Conclave the movie. So the film that just came out was released a couple of months ago, I'm sure, by pure chance, commercial chance. And so Father Greg is from Los Angeles. He's also a film critic. He's done some programs for us here at Vatican Radio over the years, even as far back as the 90s, helping us out, helping us understand the pop culture, the popular culture surrounding church events. So Father, what's your take on Conclave the movie?
Okay, this is my take. It's, when you know something about whatever the topic is, whether you're a doctor or a nurse or you're a teacher or you're in the government or you know about the monarchy, and they make a film or television show about that, you see all the mistakes and flaws. But usually movies like that aren't really about what they say they're about. Conclave, to me, is a movie about the main character, Cardinal Lawrence, played by Ralph Fiennes, and his crisis of faith. And it's his journey through that faith with the accoutrements of the conclave. The facts of how it's done they're off, but you can't do a documentary in 2 hours and have everything that's in that movie is for dramatic effect, and it relates to the crisis of faith that this man's going through. So you can't use it as a factual basis of what's going on inside that Sistine Chapel right now. It's not a battle between conservatives and liberals, although there's some aspects to it, I'm sure, and it's not about the flaws of each individual cardinal, which I'm sure people are thinking. So they see this movie and they think, okay, now I know what's going on. Well, some of it is true, but there's a lot of errors in it, What are some of the glaring ones that stood out to you? I don't know. I'd have to find out the facts about this, but I'm not sure if Cardinal-electors, would be allowed to enter like last minute like that, and there's no proof except for one little letter.
Yeah.
And I don't think that and that's the basis for the whole ending and the whole story, but which I think kind of threw the movie off a little bit. On
that point, that's exactly right, because it was made precise that no cardinal in pectore who's been named in secret, as anybody who's follows it knows that there was a in the chest, and so he's keeping his cards close to the chest. The Pope can name a cardinal without announcing it to the world. Only he and that cardinal, I imagine, would know. But for it to be valid, he has to announce it publicly by the time of his death. So even if that cardinal were in pectore, if no one knew about it, if it wasn't public record, then he was not a cardinal.
Right.
He doesn't deserve, or wouldn't have the rights to enter.
And there was
conclave.
there was a lot of not manipulation, but a lot of the previous pope was kind of like the puppeteer, controlling what comes afterwards. And the Pope doesn't do that. That's not his job. And there was the secret report of Cardinal Tremblay, the John Lithgow character, and what he was doing. And then he gets Lawrence gets the sister Isabella Rossellini to Xerox it 108 times or whatever it is. I mean, it's all dramatic conflict, intrigue, and it gives the impression. But I'm telling you, that movie's made a lot of money in the last month. Just like I remember back in '79 or '80 when they made the movie The China Syndrome. 2 weeks later, Three Mile Island happened, and again the popularity went way up. I think it's a well-made movie, but you can't take it for fact.
Yeah, but it kind of gives us a feel like we know everyone's become an expert in Conclave. And an expert on the smells and bells maybe behind it, and the show behind the proceedings that take on a grandeur that only the Vatican can do.
What was fascinating yesterday, just to sit there and watch the whole movement from the Pauline Chapel to the Sistine Chapel and the Litany of Saints, and then sitting there and then doing the whatever the
they
prayer.
Swore their oath.
Yeah. I mean, it's just like it was mesmerizing, because you saw this is real, and that was already 2 hours and nothing happened, in that sense.
But I think for in pectore, as I recall, I think it was 1991, Pope John Paul said there was a cardinal in pectore, whom he later revealed to be Cardinal Ignatius Gong Pin Mei. And the reason that a cardinal might not be named, a man might not be named, his life could be in danger. That usually was the rare times it happened. That was the case. He could be in danger if he was named, So Pope John Paul did name him, but
that was the whole story in this thing. It was the Archbishop of Kabul in Afghanistan. Now, I don't know if his life would be endangered based on, I don't know the facts of living in that city, but that was the reason. But it was not announced. You're right.
I did not see the movie, but the one thing I do know about it is that on all the airplanes flying from the United States to Rome, it is one of the most selected movies
You're
that
the fifth
people
person
view.
that's told me that.
Yeah, exactly. So the much viewed in midair movie, Conclave.
Yeah, thank y'all for that. Excellent. So it's kind of like the movie, the Netflix series, the Crown.
Yes,
everyone thinks they know about the Crown, but we really have no idea, really, do we?
Yeah.
I mean, well, none of us are.
But it's some based on some fact, but it's an imagination dialogue that's in the head of the writer, and I mean that's 60 episodes right there.
Wow.
Yeah, and it's not the first of the. It's not the first movie to come out with and talk about the conclave. I mean, the conclave has been in popular culture for as long as conclaves have been happening. There have been different expressions of it. There was the movie. It's probably sacrilegious to even mention it, but Borgia, and that had a whole. It was a long series, and they had pretty in-depth, extended episodes on the conclaves that led to the election of Pope Alexander VI and Julius II, and obviously interpretations and completely unhistorical, but it gives us a sense and kind of reveals for us the interest that the world has in what's happening here in the Vatican. As we come back to the present and to reality, instead of Hollywood's reality, what's going on is a very much interest to the entire world. it's not just Catholics in the square. There are people from all over, and from all different faiths, and that was one hallmark of Pope Francis's papacy, was this welcoming. And if you even look at St. Peter's Square, the two colonnades, they represent the Church's embrace of the entire world. Maybe you could tell us a little bit about that, Joan.
Well, just thinking of welcoming everybody, referring to numbers, there's 1.4 billion Catholics, so and then other Christians who are not Catholic. But I remember distinctly with Pope John Paul, what was so fascinating about his very long history was his outreach, of course, as Pope Francis did in his briefer papacy, his outreach to so many people, and you found out that people of all faiths, people of no faith, were fascinated by this man because he took positions that one could understand, positions of morality that you might not have be part of your writings and teachings in the church. But he could reach out to people on a people level. You don't have to know canon law or the catechism of the church to understand what John Paul taught. So I thought his reaching out in that respect. And I've always loved the image of the two colonnades embracing all of the humanity that comes inside. So you'd walk inside, and then you're going to walk towards a door of this beautiful church, this basilica of St. Peter's.
And the colonnade, Michelangelo designed the St. Peter's Square and the facade and everything. He didn't build it in the end, but he designed it. And even as soon ago as 1930s, I believe, 1920s, the squares leading up to the streets that were led up to St. Peter's Basilica, and this was how Michelangelo designed his layout of that area of the city, was just like a maze. There wasn't a straight vision. Yeah. And so the Borgo was, there were streets, but there were buildings right in front of St. Peter's Square. So the whole point was that people they'd be walking through, and they'd kind of zigzag through a maze, and all of a sudden you come up and you open up onto St. Peter's Square, and the magnificence of it, and how large and welcoming it is to, and so that was changed obviously during Mussolini's time.
But there were times when buses and cars parked in there were even
and not too long ago.
No, not too long ago. Certainly in my many years here, and there was a brief period when, as you're looking at the basilica, would be in the front part of the left-hand colonnade, when there was a brief market. People selling their fresh produce. So the square has served many people.
Yes, it has. And going back to the College of Cardinals, so the actual conclave, the reality of what's going on. Let's move now and talk a little bit about the makeup of the College of Cardinals. So the Cardinals there's 133 electors, but the whole college is 252. And 52, thank you, Joan. And the makeup has changed greatly during Pope Francis's papacy.
Yes, in fact, as a lot of people have noted, this is the largest conclave number of cardinals. We've had more cardinals. We've had more cardinals eligible to enter the conclave, but this is the first that's been more than the 120 limit that was set by Paul VI. And one of the pieces of business that the cardinals had to work out when they were preparing for this conclave was how that fit within the law. And they determined that Pope Francis, by creating more cardinals, had tacitly dispensed from the 120 limit, so that all 135 cardinals who are eligible could enter the conclave and vote. In fact, we have 133 cardinal electors in the Sistine Chapel, even as we speak. One thing that struck me as kind of curious, Father, your titular cardinal is Cardinal Collins from Toronto. Now is one of the very few times when we have two archbishops of Toronto in the conclave, the emeritus Cardinal Collins, as well as the new, very young Cardinal Frank Leo. But overall, we have 135 cardinal electors, 133 actually in the conclave, from 71 different countries. More than 3/4 of them, 108, were appointed by Pope Francis. About 22 were created by Benedict XVI, and there are still 5 cardinals who were created by John Paul II. So it created more than almost 20 years ago. And so a wide variety. Certainly since the mid-20th century, there's been a very strong effort on the part of the popes to increase the representation, ensuring that there are cardinals from around the world, from traditionally Catholic countries, from Catholics with very small Catholic populations, from large traditional elector countries like Italy and France to places that have never had a cardinal before. I think there's something like 16. One of the very curious numbers, we can talk a little bit more about that, is the number of Eastern cardinals. I believe there are 4 or 5 Eastern cardinals.
5 of them, exactly.
5 Eastern cardinals. And I know, Don, you could perhaps talk about, there was a length of time, although most cardinals now had come from Europe for a very, very long time, and our Latin cardinals, there was a run of Greek and Syriac cardinals in the early Middle Ages.
There were Greek cardinals that were, as a result of the Church's attempt to reconnect with Constantinople after the schism. But we tend to forget how diverse the early papacy was as well. There's a period in the 6th and 7th century where we have a number of Greek, Syriac, and even North African popes. Popes like Gelasius were Latin North African. But today we have Eastern Rite cardinals too, and this is a result of the reaffiliation of many churches with their own rites under papal leadership. There are 23 sui juris churches besides the Latin Church. And there are 5 cardinal-electors today that are in the conclave from representing the Eastern rites. There's Patriarch, one Patriarch, Louis Sacco of the Chaldean Church in Baghdad, Basileus Clemis, who is Syro-Malankara from India, Bernhan Jesus Surafiel, who is from the Ethiopian Church, Mykola Bichok, who is a Ukrainian, very young Ukrainian, is 44, I believe, one of the younger cardinals, and George Kuvakad from the Syro-Malabar Church.
And if you were watching the entrance into the conclave, one of the things you note in that very impressive and moving ceremony, you see all the cardinals walking in. Almost all of them are in the familiar red cassocks of the Latin Church. But the 5 Eastern cardinals stood out for, they all designed their own cardinalatial robes that reflected the traditions of their churches.
Absolutely. It's interesting to see how they work the red, the scarlet into their outfits, into their traditional outfits of their rite, and their traditional choir. And it's clearly the important, but it's also an oddity because these 5 cardinals are electing the head of the Latin Rite as well. It's an interesting extension to see how universal the Church is. That you have these Eastern cardinals participating in the election of the Patriarch of the West, and that's something that's different to consider.
And they also stand out for their headdress.
Yeah,
because it's not the typical red zucchetto. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and that was also a question when they are named cardinals. They have to ask, what is the tradition of our church and how can we incorporate what's a Latin tradition, the cardinalate, into that vestment. I think there was an Eastern Rite cardinal in the 1500s, is that right? During one of the periodic attempts at reunion between the East and West. Bessarion.
Cardinal Bessarion, yes.
Remind me, where is he from?
He was from Constantinople. He was from the clergy of Constantinople, from the party that was supportive of both the Renaissance and a renewed dialogue with the Latins. And he became very important for the transmission of Eastern Greek culture and literature to the West, and was a visible sign of unity at that very difficult time.
And one of the first Eastern cardinals in a long time, and so had a very significant role to play. You mentioned, too, Ukrainian-born Mykola Bichok is aged 45. I believe he is, in fact, the youngest cardinal in the college. The oldest taking part is Spaniard Carlos Osora Sierra, who's aged 79. It's interesting, too. There are a couple of cardinals who have just turned 80 very recently, and had the conclave come a little bit earlier, they would have been allowed to enter. In fact, I remember when Benedict made his resignation, the timing of when the resignation went into effect, there was a consideration for the cardinals who were right on the edge there, and they did get everybody in. And yet, because of the circumstances of the time for that election, the number was still under the 120 limit.
There was one of the Syro Malabar, one of the Eastern cardinals, just missed it by a week, I believe, and others like Cardinal Sarah, I think, would have expired in 2 weeks. As long as they're under 80 on the date the conclave starts, they're entitled to enter the conclave.
I think it's the day that the Pope dies. In fact, there's actually some question about that. I remember we had this discussion amongst ourselves in the broadcast booth, and UDG is very specific, and that too is to ensure, because after the Pope dies, there is the cardinals decide when the conclave opens, and that has historically been a question because of traditional long travel times, and in previous eras where there was a lot of politicking amongst the cardinalate, that could have been an option to exclude someone. So they did change it so that it was from the moment the Pope died, and then it is very much in God's hands who is going to participate in the election. Speaking of age, a few more facts about the cardinals taking part in the conclave. 6 cardinals were actually born in the 70s. Including Cardinal Baldassare Reina, the vicar of the Diocese of Rome, Canadian Cardinal Frank Leo, whom we mentioned, Lithuanian Cardinal Rolandis Makrikas, the coadjutor archpriest of the Basilica of St. Mary Major. He was involved very closely,
we have smoke.
And we do have smoke. Thank you, Don. Well done. It does look like the black smoke is coming out, signaling the conclusion of the second vote, and I think a little earlier than we were expecting.
Yeah, exactly. We weren't expecting this until about 12, at least, to 12:30. I believe we have Kelsey in the square. No, sorry about that. We do not. We're going to try to get her on the line here shortly to get this reactions. But yes, you can see now we see images of the crowd. The black smoke has come out of the chimney here shortly. Okay.
And in fact, that's what you see if you're watching on the television screen. I think all of us remember, at least all of us in studio remember, various elections and conclaves. And as soon as smoke starts coming out, the first question on everybody's lips, is it white or is it black? Happily, this time the black smoke has been very clear and is now as well. And when there is that moment, the crowd just goes silent as everybody's looking up and determining for certain what color is the smoke.
And on the modern means of communication yesterday in the square in the evening, whenever the smoke came out, it was dark. The sun had already gone down. And you could see the screens, and you can see on the square that it's a close-up there. But those, as soon as the smoke started coming out, those TVs turned off, and so that everyone would look up to the actual chimney and to focus on what's real and not just what's in front of our in front of our screens. And then it came back on, and you could see that the smoke was black. And now we're going to go live to Kelsey, who's in the square. Kelsey, what are you getting the sense of?
Wow, it's actually pretty exciting right now because you can hear the surprise from people. I know a lot of people are thinking, well, it hasn't come out yet. There's been no smoke. We're not going to see anything for now. And all around me, you could hear cheers, but also gasps and a couple of people saying, oh, my gosh, this is so exciting. It's the first time I've ever seen this. And so, yeah, there's a lot of people that are actually exiting the square now, probably going to get some lunch to get prepared for the next smoke watch. So we'll just have to wait and see.
Yeah, I think the first question, as Chris said, is it black or white? And the second question is, what am I having for lunch? Are my dinner reservations still valid?
Can I get into the restaurant with 20,000 people trying to get their pizzas and their pastas?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it's interesting, you can see on the screen now that we've got the images, the square is not extremely full. There's heavy security to get in. You got to go through metal detectors. But the first part of the Via della Conciliazione is very full. That's a very packed area. And you can see people moving off, right, Kelsey?
Yeah, actually, it's you're right that in front of the piazza, Via Conciliazione is packed with a lot of people, a lot of reporters, but a lot of people. And actually in the square, right in front of the steps leading up to the basilica, that's pretty full, but around the obelisk, it's pretty empty. And of course, as you mentioned, Devin, a lot of people are exiting now, gonna get some water and food and recharge.
Yeah, because we're going to be back again this afternoon. That means the next possible smoke would be around 5:30. This is just a guess, more or less, of the indications that we've received. At that point, it would come out only if the first ballot elected a new pope, and so we would see white smoke only come out around 5:30 or 6 or so. Later this evening, for sure there will be a black or a white smoke at around between 7:30. It all depends on when the Cardinals get started, and from there we will continue on, and we hope the Cardinals are moving along in their voting process and guiding us toward the future of the church.
And again, very interesting phenomenon I think we saw last night. The square starts out almost not quite empty. There's always lots of people there, but it seems kind of sparse. And then people start filtering in. It fills up. But the moment, I think we all remember, the moment the white smoke comes out, everybody in Rome drops what they're doing. I remember John Paul II's, the conclave after John Paul II, and when Benedict was elected, people were actually leaving their cars by the side of the street and running to St. Peter's Square. We saw it too of Pope Francis, which was later in the evening, and although it was not so dense when the white smoke came out, by the time he appeared on the balcony, all of St. Peter's Square, all the way up Via della Conciliazione, packed shoulder to shoulder with people. The whole world shows up.
Where we are right now, a sea of people coming, from near the Casa Sant'Angelo, and just pouring into the Piazza Pia area, and then, as you said, down Conciliazione. There's no way you would have tried to go against the crowd. You would have been trampled, I think. But it was an astonishing thing.
And since this brings us to, we've seen the black smoke, we do not have a pope yet. Voting will continue this afternoon. And with that, we're going to wrap up this broadcast. We thank you, Kelsey, for helping us out in the square, Eduardo, Father Greg Uppersell, Joan Lewis, Dr. Don Prudlow. We really appreciate all of your help and walking us through the intricacies of this historic moment here in Vatican City State. And so our broadcast will pick up again this afternoon at around 5 or 5:30, depending on the indications. And many thanks go to our in-studio sound engineers and our producers. And
Sa Usapang OFW, we have a continuing coverage of the ongoing conclave. At kanina nga ho ay nakita natin na isang black smoke ang lumabas doon sa most famous chimney sa Vatican, sa buong mundo ngayon. Ibig sabihin ho, wala hong Pope na napili in the second balloting doon sa conclave na nangyayari sa Rome. So, we have to wait until this afternoon sa kanilang oras, ibig sabihin madaling araw ho sa atin, para malaman kung magkakaroon ng resolution at magkakaroon tayo ng next pope in the next balloting. In the meantime, kanina ho, hindi namin nakausap si Cardinal Quevedo, but we got lucky today, now, at this point, at nandito po siya kasama natin. Magandang gabi, Cardinal Quevedo. Marami pong salamat for joining us.
Good afternoon too. I'm not sure if you can hear me.
I can hear you.
Yes.
Pero hindi ho namin kayo makita. Wala pa ho kayo sa camera. Baka ho na-i-off ninyo yung camera, Cardinal.
Let me see.
So, ngayon nga ho, yes, Cardinal, paki-check lang po muna yung video. In the meantime, yung tech team natin, yes, yung video nyo po, hindi ho namin kayo makita. In the meantime, dahil nga black smoke yung lumabas, tulad ng sinabi natin, this is the second ballot, the second ballot. So, wala hong napili na Pope. Kaya ngayon, naghihintay ang ating mga Catholic, faithful, para malaman kung merong mapagkakaayusan at mapipili later doon sa third ballot sa ongoing conclave. Ayan ho, kumakaway ang ating mga Catholic faithful, masayang-masaya sila. Kahapon nga ho, kaninang madaling araw actually, napakaganda ng scenario at ng scene kasi habang nakafocus yung most famous chimney sa Vatican, ay panay ang lipad at saka ang pose ng mga seagull na parang sinasabi sa Catholic faithful at saka sa buong mundo na there is peace, there is love, and there is hope, and that malapit nang magkaroon tayo ng next Pope. Okay, andyan na si Cardinal. Cardinal, magandang gabi ho ulit. Ayan, no? Cardinal, thank you so much for joining us. I am Ching B. Fernandez. Sir, Cardinal, Your Eminence. I'm Ching B. Fernandez. Your Eminence, habang maghihintay ho tayo ng next na balloting, which is around siguro mga between 1 to 2 a.m. our time, para dun sa third ballot, ang siguro gusto namin itanong, as a non-elector, kasi hindi kayo kasama bakit po ba may cardinal na non-elector at meron hong kasama dun sa nag-i-elect? How do you distinguish the non-elector who is also a cardinal and the electors na cardinal din naman?
By pictures, you cannot recognize them, but by age, the age of the elector is 79. It's the limit.
Oh, okay.
You're no longer eligible to elect the Pope.
Okay. Yes, Cardinal. Yes, Your Eminence. Opo.
So I came home to wait for the white smoke, as everyone is doing.
Oh, I see. Pero ibig niyo pong sabihin, Cardinal, you were there during the funeral of Pope Francis, the late Pope Francis.
Yes, almost all the cardinals were there for the funeral mass. And the 4 cardinals from the Philippines were there.
So, right now, Cardinal, since you are over 80, over 79, right?
Yeah.
Yes, because if you join the group of electors, meaning you're also a possible candidate. Is that right?
Yes, they can elect one even though he's not at the conclave.
They can also elect someone who is not even in the conclave? Your Eminence? Naghang yata si...
Yes.
Yes. Ibig niyo pong sabihin, pwedeng mag-elect ng Pope kahit hibala dun sa conclave?
Opo, yeah.
Oh, I see. That's something new. Hindi ho yan nabanggit ng mga theologians at saka ng mga historians na nagsasalita kagabi while waiting for the first smoke na lumabas dyan sa chimney. How is that possible, Your Eminence?
Pardon, there's no... In the document of Pope Francis, which So Pope John Paul II, Universi Gregis Dominici, there is no mention of an age limit to become a pope. So anyone who is past 80 can be elected as pope.
Oh, so hindi ho totoo yung sinabi kagabi ng mga theologian and historian who are curating while waiting for the smoke to rise from the chimney na hindi pwedeng i-elect yung 80 years old and above dahil nga sa health issues. Hindi ho totoo yun.
If there are health issues of the one who is to be elected as already past 80, then he can
decline.
He can advise the electors not to put him on the list.
So, Cardinal, if you don't mind, I'm just a little curious. So, why did you come home if you can vote as an elector?
I cannot vote as an elector.
Why? Why not?
Past 80. So I came home.
Okay. So you cannot vote, but you can be you can be chosen. Yes. Okay. Yes. I see. So that's it. You cannot vote, but you can be chosen as the next pope.
Yeah, somebody can vote for you. I do not expect anyone to be voting for me, but
now, Your Eminence, I would like to go to yung thought. How does an elector think when voting during the conclave, diba? Ano ho bang what are the discussions usually, if you have an idea, on how to select the next pope? Like there is the second ballot, but they were not able to choose the next pope. What usually goes into the discussion to be able to really choose one?
They don't have any discussion during the conclave. All the discussions take place before the conclave in what is called the general congregation. And there were several of those general congregations before the conclave. And I was still there when the general congregations took place. But then I came home during that time. The Cardinals in the Philippines asked me to go there and join them in the general discussions, general congregations they are called. I said, no, I don't have to go there. I don't wish to be there for something I am not going to be involved in. I will just listen to you when you come home from the Vatican to find out what you were talking about.
Yeah, so Your Eminence, may tanong lang po ako. You were there during the discussion, during the general congregation. You said that, no?
I did not go there.
You did not attend.
What they do is discuss. They discuss with one another, and they come to some kind of a consensus about what kind of pope is needed for today. And in the light of the different crises that face the world, climate change, secularism, the heating of the environment, and those are the things that they have to talk about. The divisions in the church, and they come out what kind of pope they will think about, what kind of pope they believe would be a pope to meet those crises.
And with your experience, Your Eminence, and of course you also have the experience in the Catholic Church, what kind of a pope should they choose?
If I were an elector, I would choose someone who would continue the policies of the late Pope Francis, which is that of involve the church in being involved with the peripheries. It was his first call to the church was go forth to the peripheries. By peripheries mean to the poor, the homeless, the sick, and the church should not stay in its comfort zone, but going out to the streets. That's what his clarion call was at the beginning of his pontificate. And I would like somebody to continue that idea of the church being involved with social.
Your Eminence, during the discussion last night, and based on what you're saying now, you said that you would prefer the next Pope to continue the work of the late Pope Francis.
Yeah.
We know for a fact that there is a diminishing number of Catholics, both those who practice and those who join and those who live. There is a sort of there is an influx because even in my own group, you could see a lot of them looking for other religion. So my question probably is, during the papacy of Pope Francis, since you wanted the next Pope to continue his work, was there any increase in the number of faithful, or should I say, was there more evident practice of the Catholic teachings by the about 1.4 billion Catholics? Because I just want to make this point. When I go to churches abroad, the Catholic churches are being used as museum, and the others are empty during special occasions like Holy Week, when the churches here are filled with the faithful. Abroad, there's no one. So was there a significant increase due to the pastoral work of Pope Francis, or what is that? Is that just a stalemate?
Well, from social media, I know that we know that many of those lapsed Catholics have rejoined the church. I don't know how many actually rejoined the church because of the figure of Pope Francis. With the word periphery that he used, go forth to the peripheries, he meant that pastors should go to those who are not homeless, but also to the lapsed Catholics, to those who no longer go to church. Go to them and be with them. That's the clarion call, as I said, of Pope Francis. And I know from social media that indeed many of those lapsed Catholics confessed to their going back to the church and believing in the church again because of the figure of Pope Francis. I don't know the statistics for this, but I don't know how significant it is, but there are many.
Anyway, Your Eminence, I'd like to follow through on that topic, but before that, I'd like to get your opinion. Why do you think there's so much interest in the image of the black or white smoke in the chimney in the Vatican?
Well,
how come there is this certain fascination and amazement?
And
the whole world was watching it, not probably even the non-Catholics, watching for the next Pope to be chosen. When we know that for other religion, I do not know how they do the transition of leadership, but for some reason, there is this certain fascination on that white smoke or that black smoke that will indicate whether we already have the next Pope. What's in there?
There's a significance to that fumata, the smoke. There is a mystery to it, and it has global significance. Everybody looks for it, and then it has a spiritual significance, which also signifies to a certain extent the breath of the Holy Spirit, the incense that goes up to heaven, which is used in the church, incense, and the fumata is similar to that. It goes up to heaven, and people know, because it has global significance, whether there is a pope or not. So the smoke is very important. It has ritual. It is an old practice, and even though one uses when we are in the digital age, the church continues to use that because of its symbolic significance.
So it is the fascination and the smoke that rises up to the heavens.
Right. Right.
All right. Now, Your Eminence, no, we're just wondering, probably a lot of people who are really following this development are wondering, what are the cardinals thinking now? Bakit hindi sila makapili ng Pope?
It takes some time they had these general congregations where people speak up and voice their thoughts about the next Pope, and then they decide on what kind of Pope they will have, but they still need to know each other. And so it will take some time for them. In fact, it takes maybe 2 or 3 days. I hope before the week is over, mayroon na. Pero even if after 7 votes, they spend a day of prayer and reflection again, and then they continue voting. After 7 more votes, the same thing. They stop the process and they go and pray and reflect again. That's the way it is. It will take maybe 2 or 3 days, even 4 days, I think, before they can elect a pope.
Your Eminence, you said that you were not there. You did not attend the general congregation, right?
Yes.
Hindi ho kayo umattend, oo. So, hindi kayo umattend doon. Now, ang next tanong ko ho is, how many electors do we have there? Filipino electors? Si Cardinal Tagle lang po ba? O meron pa tayong ibang kasama?
3 electors from the Tagle, who is staying in Rome, Cardinal Advincula, who is the Archbishop of Manila, and Cardinal David, who is the Bishop of Caloocan. So there are 3.
And I don't know, I think even though the Catholic Church is trying to dispel the perception and the rumors that this is a political exercise, my question is, are there factions usually in choosing the next Pope?
No, each one must decide for himself. It's very strict. There is the document of John Paul II, which was revised by Pope Benedict XVI, is very strict on this, that there is no one should elect by popularity, by friendship, by politics, by factions. Each one has to decide himself before the Holy Spirit and ask the Holy Spirit to guide him in voting. And when they actually vote, they say, in my conscience, according to my conscience, and moved by the Holy Spirit, I choose this one to be the Pope.
Yeah, Your Eminence, no, it has been noticed, no, that the Cardinal Tagle had been included in the, ano po bang tawag doon, Papabile. Just for the information of those who are watching this and those who are following the conclave, when you are included in the Papabile po ba, there is a high probability that you are in the running? Just asking.
Well, they are one of the 33 cardinals who are there, and even after outside the conclave, there are other cardinals who might be voted in. No, there's nothing to do. That social media, especially in the Philippines and in some parts of the Europe, but if you read the social media in Italy, they're talking about Italians. They're talking about in Germany, you're talking about a European, not so much an Italian, and Eastern Europe, and Orthodox churches, united with the Catholic Church. We're talking about one of the patriarchs, Patriarch of Jerusalem, for instance, So our own social media in the Philippines is filled with just about Cardinal Tagle, but he's one of the numerous papabilis, as it were.
So, Your Eminence, no, just to follow through, no, just in case that someone from, not from Italy, not from the traditional, diba, will be chosen as the next pope, like those you mentioned, no, let's say someone from Asia or from the patriarchs of, let's say, Israel, diba, how would it impact? Aside from your saying that you wish that someone, next pope would continue the work of Pope Francis, how would it impact the church of today? If someone, let's say, from the global south, from Asia, or let's say from those non-traditional countries will be chosen as the pope, how are you going to assess, or how would it impact on the church of today?
My general impression is that the cardinals loved Pope Francis and the way he acted and the kind of orientation that he had for the church. So I imagine that even though one is Asian or one is from Eastern Europe or one from the Eastern Europe and one in the Middle East would be elected, I think that the Pope, the new Pope, could still continue the ways of Pope Francis. He was universally loved and appreciated for renewing the church, giving new life to the church.
Your Eminence, I just want to hear your opinion. Why they are trying to compare or trying to wish for someone like Pope Francis to be the next Pope? They're wishing for someone like Pope Francis to be the next Pope. My next question probably is, why not Saint John Paul? You know, the Pope before Saint Benedict, Pope Benedict, and then Pope Francis. So why not Saint John Paul? What is the difference between the papacy of Pope John Paul or Saint John Paul II and Pope Francis?
Well, Pope Francis made the papacy very, very personal and very, very close to people. And Pope John Paul II was similar to that when he was still younger. And he was the one who would go out and be with people. But even Pope Francis is more than just John Paul. I think the holiness of John Paul, the cardinals would also wish to have for
the next Pope.
For Pope Francis, for the next Pope. Holiness and being with people, it's part of the love of God, love of people, love of one's neighbor. So they would like also follow the example of the holiness of Pope John Paul II.
Your Eminence, no, let me go back to the first ballot last night, no, when it was when the people were watching. As I said, there were the seagulls, no. They kept on flying and stopping there, perching near the chimney. So a lot of people were saying and commenting that it means peace, love, and hope. In this period where there is sort of period of waiting and smoke watching, what are the faithful supposed to do? Because it seems that there's no anxiety, but there is this great anticipation. So what can the faithful do? What are we supposed to do as a Catholic? Just wait, pray? What else can we do?
Well, The Catholics all over the world are encouraged, exhorted by the papal document to pray not only for the next pope, but to pray for the whole church. And that's the prayer that is being done. Different formulas for that prayer in different countries, in different archdioceses. I saw one prayer for the new pope, which was more on a pope for social justice rather than a pope who will emphasize the doctrine of the church. But all these are expected of the pope, of course, to hold fast to the doctrines of the church, to support and defend the church, and for the church to go out to the streets and be with the homeless and the sick, and be a drive for social justice. These are expected of the Pope, and I hope that the prayer of the faithful for the church and for the new Pope would include these elements.
Your Eminence, we have two votings. You have two balloting already. And if we are going back to the Pope Francis, when he was chosen, there were only 2 ballots, 2 days, right? He was chosen on the second day. So we're just on the second day. My question is, if there will be, this is a little speculative, for Pope Francis.
The second day or the third day?
Second day. This is the second day. First day was yesterday, right, Your Eminence?
Their first vote was on the 7th. And
yesterday. Today is the second vote.
The 4 votes on the 8th.
Today.
On the 9th. And Rome is 7 hours behind us.
Yes. So they have already voted halfway through May 8th.
Twice.
May 8th. Yes. So we're on the second day. Is that correct?
And twice in the morning of the second day.
Yes. And then twice in the afternoon.
Twice more in the afternoon.
Yes. Which will be around 1 to 2 a.m. Philippine time.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right.
So my question is, it's a little speculative, because I know for a fact that there was a time when it took 3 years for the Catholic Church to choose the next Pope.
Yes.
Of course, that has been addressed. Okay. So my question is, if there will be several ballots past, let's say, 2, 3, or 4 days, would that be a manifestation of a deep or widening division in the Catholic Church, which you also mentioned earlier, which should be addressed by the next Pope? Is that a manifestation, or is it just a healthy discernment of the electors?
Well, it can mean that, but it can also mean the fact that there are several papabilis, and that they are not very with platforms, as it were, with platforms. The platforms are not publicized, but they know who certain cardinals are for, and they are debating among them within themselves and reflecting in the Holy Spirit about who should be. So after 21 votes, they choose. If there are 8 cardinals that are being voted on, they choose the 2 highest after 21 votes, so that certainly they will get 89 votes from the 2 of them. And the two electors who are on the top 2 will not vote anymore. So there is absolute certainty that after 21 votes, there will be a pope.
So that will be around between 4 to 5 days, if we're going to count the 4 balloting a day.
Yes.
4 to 5 days. So meaning today is the second day. Probably if we will be lucky, this coming Sunday, which is Mother's Day.
Yeah. As I said, after 7 votes, after
21.
After every 7 votes, they spend a day of prayer.
Oh,
And
so they will break.
After another 7 votes, 7 votings, they spend another day.
So
On the 21st, finally, the solution to it would be only 2 will be put on the list, the top 2 on the list.
I see. So meaning it could drag until next week.
7 votes. There are 7 votes every day.
8 votes.
No?
8 votes.
8 votes every day.
Yeah. So if today today is 4.
First day.
Yes. 2 yesterday.
On the third day, 2 yesterday.
Yeah, 6.
2. Yeah.
So tomorrow. Yes, Your Eminence. Go ahead.
7 votes for the first 2 days, no? Yesterday and today. And then, is that it? 4, no, 5. 2 votes every day, 4 votes every day. 5, 9.
So by Friday, Saturday, they have to take a break.
Yeah.
Yeah. By Saturday.
There's 7 votings.
Yes.
Yeah. Take a break.
Okay. So, given this scenario right now, we are hopeful that tonight or early morning today or early morning tomorrow, Philippine time, we will have our next Pope. But in the meantime, Your Eminence, what do you think? What do you think should we just do as a whole, as a church, aside from, as you said, praying, aside from going to the periphery? What else can we do?
Well, there's not much we can do except watch for the white smoke.
So smoke watching.
And pray and pray for the cardinals. Pray for them to be guided by the Holy Spirit, and pray for the whole church. That the whole church during the time when there is no Pope will be safeguarded by the Holy Spirit, and that Jesus, who is always present with us, will also continue to be present in the church when there is no Pope.
Your Eminence, have you attended the conclave?
No, it was Pope Francis who created me cardinal after he was made Pope.
Oh,
so
I see.
I never.
Yes. Okay. So, probably as a personal question, as a cardinal who has been appointed by Pope Francis, is it more agonizing to watch from the outside, or do you think it should be better if you are part of the electors?
It's very hard to get into my feelings. No, I wish I had the privilege of being an elector. Yeah. So I watched the cardinals who are electors, and was with them before the funeral. I knew many of them, and many of them, especially Asian bishops, knew me, and many bishops from Europe knew me, and they greeted one another, and they realized I will not be one of the electors, and they asked for prayers, and that's what I'm doing. I pray for them, and I pray that the church will be safeguarded by the Lord during the time when there's no Peter around.
Okay. Yes. So, Your Eminence, last question. Out of the lists which are, popping up and being floated around, again, this is a personal question. Out of the names which are being floated around, would you be able to at least pinpoint, let's say, the top 2 who will get the highest vote out of the names which are being floated around? I'm sure you know this because you are a cardinal yourself.
Well, in private media, I said that the top 3 might be Parolin, Zuppi, and Tagle.
Okay. So our own Cardinal Tagle is part of the list.
Well,
Your list.
I would think that because many Asian bishops know him, and many of the Curia bishops know him as well. Yeah, he's well known all over the world. But again, it's not popularity that is the deciding cause. It is Cardinal Tagle's personality. Is the principal features of his personality are very well known, and so I put Cardinal Tagle as one of the top 3.
Okay.
The other 2 are Italians.
So thank you so much, Your Eminence. We are really very grateful that you were able to join us. I hope that we can call you again once we have, once there is already the chosen one, so that you could probably guide the faithful on what to do if they're going to listen to the first Urbi et Orbi of the new Pope.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Your Eminence.
Thank you.
And that's it. This is our continuing coverage of the Conclave. Manatiling nakatutok sa aming live broadcast ng 2025 Conclave at patuloy nating damhin at ipagdasal ang sandaling ito para sa simbahang Katolika, lalo na yung mga Katoliko. At sa gitna naman ng katahimikan sa Vatican at ng buong mundo, sama-sama tayong manalangin para the absence of our Peter that vacuum would be filled soon in the conclave that is ongoing, and that the 133 electors be able to find that discernment and guidance from the Holy Spirit. Sa ngalan po ng Daily Tribune, kami po ay lubos na nagpapasalamat sa inyong pagtutok at pakikisa. Patuloy po ninyong subaybayan ng aming live updates at special na balita sa aming social media platforms habang ginuguhit ang bagong kabanata sa kasaysayan ng simbahan. Ako po si Ching B. Fernandez. Thank you so much and good evening.